Our next guest has had a front row seat to what's happening behind the scenes. Joining us now, Omeed Malik, president, founder of 1789 Capital. It's good to have you on, Omeed. And are you actually, where are you right now? Are you on, is this a Zoom?
This is a Zoom in my office, but yeah, I think you're implying I'm about 5 minutes away from Mar-a-Lago.
About 5 minutes away from Mar-a-Lago. Former Democrat. I think you have a famous employee named DJT Jr. Is that true?
That is true. The junior being the operative word there, not the president, but his son. Yeah. So, but that's just a formality. He and I have been business partners for almost 4 years now, investing in what we call the EIG economy, which stands for Entrepreneurship, Innovation, and Growth. And that's our acronym that stands totally counter to ESG.
Right. And even when a publication tries to describe 1789 or you, they say anti-woke. You comfortable with that?
You're picking up on something pretty important. You know, when we were the loyal opposition, maybe it's okay to have an anti in front of your name, but I think we were validated in our thesis with what happened a few weeks ago. We prefer a much more positive vision, to your point, which is focusing on how to spur innovation. But what we clearly do not support are ESG or DEI policies that we think have destroyed shareholder value, really, which is factual now that you can map that performance out over the last 15 years. We also want to make sure that we're providing choice to customers. And it's all predicated in data, by the way. If you look at 2020 voting patterns, the folks that voted for Biden in 2020 represented 70% of American GDP, and Trump voters were 30% of American GDP. So at first blush, you might say, oh, that's not that great. Well, 30% of American GDP is $7 trillion. That's the third largest economy in the world. And I think it's stipulated that for a long time, corporate America was not only ignoring them, but alienating them. We want to play in those areas. And, you know, you can have an emerging market south of the Mason-Dixon line.
It's all six things, and I'm talking about entrepreneurship, innovation, growth, equity, social, government. It seems like any decent startup or company, by definition, has components of all those things. I guess it's just how you emphasize things where we went awry. I mean, who starts a company that doesn't think about entrepreneurship, innovation, and growth, as well as governance and everything else, Omeed?
It's so much more complicated than that, unfortunately, and you guys have been spending a few years talking to Vivek about it. It starts with the asset management arena. So you have to look at the capital flows that are informing behavior. So you've seen the conduct of public companies. I don't think that Exxon wants to get out of fossil fuels, but they're pressured to do so. That kind of conduct and behavior trickles all the way down to Silicon Valley. You had, until very recently, some of the biggest Silicon Valley firms refusing to invest in any areas of defense tech. That's an area that we have stepped into because their employees, and for whatever reasons, they didn't want to support the U.S. government. At the same time, they were more than comfortable going and investing in China, which is our number one enemy or adversary, if you will, as well as starting Chinese-only funds where they would receive money from Chinese investors. I try to equate that to someone starting a fund during the Cold War and going over to the Soviet Union and raising capital, but not at the same time investing in America. So that kind of absurdity presented us with the opportunity to fill in over a couple of years ago.
Reportedly, you had something to do with Tulsi Gabbard and maybe RFK Jr. Beginning to warm up to the president-elect early on and eventually endorsing, and I guess even J.D. Vance. You had relationships with these individuals as well, and you would say that you sort of helped in that regard?
Yeah, well, with respect to J.D. Vance, he comes from the same area, so we had a previous relationship, and I was one of his first donors when he was still running in the primary in the state in Ohio. So I've just known him for a while and was.
Where are you from in Ohio, Omeed?
No. I'm from New Jersey.
Okay.
But to be clear, when he was running for Senate in Ohio, that's when we were supporting him. So back then.
Okay, because I actually am from Cincinnati, and Middletown is right. I mean, it's almost the same thing. But yeah, go ahead. So
my college girlfriend was from Chillicothe, Ohio. So that's right outside of Columbus, if that counts. But yeah, so I have some
that counts.
Ohio. Okay, so Yeah, kind of. So that's JD Vance. As it relates to Tulsi Gabbard, I was one of her first donors in 2019 when she ran for president and maintained a strong relationship with her throughout that process. And then same with Robert Kennedy. I think the more important point, and I can obviously go into details of those endorsements, but the reality is with respect to with RFK and Tulsi, they represented a much broader point, I think, what's happened in the country, which are both former Democrats who went through either a metamorphosis or an awakening, however you want to put it, and felt like the Democratic Party they knew had moved away from them. I had that awakening, I'll put it, more around 2019 or 2020. But whether you're talking about Kennedy or Tulsi or even Musk, all three of whom voted for Biden in 2020, you kind of knew that if those iconoclasts were shifting, there were going to be millions of people behind them because they represented that. And that's why I was so bullish on the election heading into it. And in contrast, what did the Democrats bring over? Lynn Cheney. I'm not sure she had a huge constituency.
Right. I mean, what do you think about the race for this Treasury Secretary role and clearly what's now spilling out into the public just about the sort of internal debate about some of these names, whether it be the CEO of Cantor Fitzgerald or Scott Bessent or now Mark Rowan, who apparently is flying in from Asia to meet with the president-elect, or Kevin Warsh, or perhaps other names that you want to throw out there?
Look, at a high level with the first two, Lutnick, I was a client of his for a D-SPAC. I know him well in business. And with Scott, he was a client of mine when I was at Bank of America when he was starting his hedge fund. So I have relationships from the business side with both of these folks who are extremely accomplished in their own way. I would look at what the Journal put out last night. I'm not sure if you guys saw it, about the kind of person you need for Treasury. And I think they were spot on, which is, to one extent, you don't want to do what Musk is saying, which is to go in there and blow things up. That's one department that I probably don't feel that way as a market participant. You're going to need someone that's going to create confidence with their abilities from a macroeconomic perspective and their credibility. So that's a quality I would look for. But at the same time, and this is what's really important and it needs to inform almost every pick the president makes, is how do you take someone that is accomplished in the field, but at the same time is going to incorporate some of the more innovative, I'd say, elements of this America First Trump policy. And so specifically with respect to Treasury, you're going to have somebody who has all the things I described, but at the same time is going to get on board with DOGE and the cutting as well as the tariffs. So that is why sometimes it takes us longer to find people, because I think we're carving out a third way.
Well, so when you think about so if you take out Lutnick from that group, then you're talking about a Bessent. I don't know if a Bessent, you would know better than I, whether a Bessent or a Kevin Warsh is demonstrably on board with tariffs, or by the way, similarly with a Mark Rowan.
But again, that's going to be what they have to prove to the president. And, my knowledge of Scott and Howard is that they both are completely on board with that. I don't have a personal relationship with the other two. They're obviously extremely accomplished. So I'm not questioning anything about the ability or acumen. But through the interview process, that's what they're going to have to demonstrate to President Trump.
I mean, you're investing in media, but
yes.
Tucker Carlson's media company. Do you think that what is the current state, in your view, after this election of legacy media? And do you think it's ripe for disruption? And what's it look like? I mean, all media is going through these gut-wrenching changes right now. I don't know. Has mainstream media really come to grips with who they are and what the country thinks at this point of mainstream media after this election?
I mean, look, there's clearly going to be a change on the economic side. Yeah, that's what I focus on. Just a moment with the new FCC chairman, you clearly have a very strong view about something that's upset a lot of us. I mean, my galvanizing moment was really what I saw was kind of suppression of speech at the hands of either big tech monopolies or the mainstream media. What that has caused, particularly during the COVID period, is a capitalistic desire to fuel options. And that's exactly what either the Tucker Carlson network that we invested in or Substack that we've invested in was fueled by. So there was a demand for these other platforms. And then you see it manifest in this last election, to your point, Joe. And it had a big impact with Joe Rogan and the fact that the entire strategy of both RFK before he dropped out and then Trump was to go to these platforms. And you see that they actually have a lot more people watching them in many cases than the mainstream media. So I think there's going to be a reckoning. I heard that Joe Scarborough and Mika went to come and see the president. That was after 7 years.
Yeah, they said that themselves.
Right. I think they said that this morning. So that is clearly, I think, a microcosm of what you're going to see as a change in behavior. I don't think, regardless of what side of the aisle you're on, the last 8 years was productive to have this acrimonious relationship between those of us that are affiliated with this administration and the media writ large. I think if you can get something a little bit more straight, hopefully in response to the challenges that they face, you're going to have something come a little bit more in the media, in the middle. And I have seen that to a certain extent with, obviously you guys do it, and some of the other platforms have dissenting voices on. I think that's extremely necessary.
I mean, one of the other names talking about dissension among Republicans, Matt Gaetz. Where do you land on that? And at a time when clearly the president and president-elect has a huge number of priorities to get through, whether you think that scrambles and creates an additional challenge or headwind that maybe he doesn't need. That's one perspective. Other people, clearly the president thinks that this is the right man who's going to shake things up.
Yeah, I'll always tell you guys, as I've already done in this interview, when I have a personal relationship with someone, which is usually most of the time, but I don't know him personally, but obviously I know him by reputation. I think, speaking candidly, there are areas I think he's done great work on. Other parts he's controversial. The point of the exercise, obviously, is for him to go through the confirmation process and see what comes out. So I would say, though, that there is a concern, and you guys are aware of this on our side, that the last 4 years you saw the weaponization of a lot of the legal system. And I think this is clearly a pick to counteract that in the president's mind. And so, I'd probably leave it at that.
Very good. All right, Omeed, I don't know, where are we? About halfway. I don't even know if we're halfway finished, going very quickly, and every day gives us plenty to talk about. And I think we'd probably like to talk to you again at some point if you're open to it, but appreciate your time this morning.
Yeah, anytime. Enjoy what you do, and it was a pleasure to speak with all of you. I hope you have a great day.
Thanks for coming on.